and gonna start with the slideshow. Can I just see a couple of thumbs up if you can see the slides okay? All right, that's awesome. So let's get started. The title of this is Growing It Forward, and we're going to tell you a little bit about a garden journey that we've had for the last 4 years since 2017. And it will be a journey both through many beautiful gardens and a journey through the political process that happens in cities in order to get these kinds of great spaces. So first, just quickly about us, as was already mentioned, Kay and I are both with the Great Park Garden Coalition, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that we founded 4 years ago, specifically to support the creation of the Botanic Garden at the Great Park. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We are also both University of California Master Gardeners. So you may have seen one or the other of us giving talks to garden clubs, perhaps yours, as University of California Master Gardeners. So we are just dedicated to gardening. We think that gardens make a huge difference in people's lives. And just like you, we want to leave the world a little better than we found it. And we're trying to do that through the creation of this amazing, we hope, botanic garden. I think all of us, by definition, because we belong to garden clubs and garden ourselves, we think that public gardens are absolutely awesome. And you probably have, and I know Kay and I have visited gardens. In fact, Kay and I have gone literally worldwide and certainly nationwide to visit public gardens. And we have just seen so many amazing, amazing places. And because we work with the public and a lot of children, we've seen what these spaces can do for people, particularly young people. And so we're going to take you to visit a few of those gardens that we have visited. And we're gonna start with this one called the Eden Project. Kay and I were lucky enough a few years ago, before we started the Great Park Garden Coalition project, to be included on a tour that was sponsored by Master Gardeners to England, mostly Cornwall. And we visited many gardens, but this one in particular, the Eden Project, really spoke to us. And on the next slide, you'll see why. It's actually an old china pit mine where they mined clay to make china. And it was just a big giant hole in the ground. And they created this amazing botanic garden that is very educational and actually attracts Disneyland type crowds in terms of the number of people. What they've created is two completely enclosed huge domes, and one is for rainforest gardens and the other is for Mediterranean gardens. And when we went into the Mediterranean garden, we just had this surreal moment because lo and behold, we walk around the corner and we see California. So they have this section that is California in England. And of course, in order to create that, they've had to build this giant dome. If you look at the top of the photo, you can see that we are basically under, it's not glass, I don't know, it's plexiglass or something, but we are completely enclosed in a false environment. And their poor grapevines, we're doing okay, but they don't look like grapevines here in California. And they had a few poppies, which aren't in this picture, struggling along, California poppies. But Kay and I just looked at each other and said, oh my gosh, what they go to, the lengths they go to create an environment to grow the plants that we can just see every day is amazing. And so it made us just completely appreciate where we live and how fortunate we are to be able to create public gardens that other people in the world just lust after. Also, as part of that trip, we went to the Chelsea Garden Show. And if you've never had an opportunity to do that, it was on my bucket list. And it's just a 3-day garden show where they truck in plants at the peak of their bloom and create multiple garden environments with different themes. It's stunning. I've never seen anything like it before or since. So if you get an opportunity to go for sure. The culture in Britain around gardens is amazing. garden designers are equivalent to rock stars there. It's just wonderful how they value the benefits and the beauty that gardens provide. And this slide here is actually, again, a Mediterranean garden. This one was summer or spring, so the plants were able to survive outside for this 3-day show. And it was one of the award-winning gardens, which had Mediterranean plants that we just grow here and take for granted. Then we came back to Irvine, and this is what we see out at the Great Park. And it's a wonderful, amazing asset to have this 1,300-acre great park. It's about the same size as Golden Gate Park. It's bigger than Central Park in New York. And eventually it will be just this amazing resource for the community. Right now, it's almost all sports fields. There's about 200 acres worth of sports fields. And of course, the only folks that use the sports fields are those who are involved in team sports, wonderful activities. All of our kids participated in that. But the park isn't used by, a lot of folks who are not playing sports. And so the future areas of the Great Park, we hope, and we are lobbying for them particularly to include a botanical garden. So how did I don't know how that little line got there. I don't know if you guys are seeing that. I apologize for that little blue line. So anyway, how did we go about this? We started a grassroots movement, and we'll tell you why we started it. We were aware that in the master plan for the Great Park, there is a future botanic garden, originally identified as a 59-acre botanic garden. That's big, in an area called the Cultural Terrace of the Great Park. The reason that we became aware of this is because in 2009, we were asked as master gardeners to help create a small demonstration garden called the Farm and Food Lab. It's only about an acre, and it focuses on edibles. And we helped create that, and we staffed it for a number of years. And in so doing, we heard that there was this 59-acre botanic garden in the Cultural Terrace in the future. And of course, as avid gardeners, we were super excited, but kept our ear to the ground to find out when that was going to happen. And then in 2017, we became aware that the city of Irvine was holding a series of public meetings to review with the public what the public would like to see in this area called the Cultural Terrace. So we were super excited and went to the first one in January because we assumed we would hear about the timing of the construction of the Botanic Garden. Lo and behold, when we got there, they had a short list of 5 preferred items that wouldn't be included in the Cultural Terrace: a museum, a lake, or several museums, lake, amphitheater, etc. But what was left off of their list was the Botanic Garden. And so, of course, we were appalled. And when the time came for us to interact with city staff at that outreach meeting, we asked them, why was the Botanic Garden left off this list when it's part of the master plan? And their answer to us was, as they were handing out these surveys for people to fill out, please go ahead and write it in if that's something you think should be included in the Cultural Terrace. So of course we did, but then afterwards when we left, we thought, if they're basing decisions on what people are going to rank 1 through 5 of their preferred items, most people won't think to write in a botanic garden. So how can we let people know that they need to do this? So what we did is we mobilized. We created a Facebook page for the Great Park Garden, and we gathered email lists, emailed all the master gardeners we knew, all of our friends, and basically encouraged them to attend. There was a series of 5 meetings through April to attend these public outreach meetings, to be sure and write in botanical gardens as one of the things they felt strongly about. And if you couldn't attend any of these meetings, to please just send an email to the city council and let them know Sorry about that. Got a little problem going on. There we go. Um, and to let the city council know that you wanted the Botanic Garden kept in the cultural terrace. And we also became involved in the political process. We asked to have meetings with city council folks. We went to city council meetings, met with city staff, and we were advised that in order to be taken seriously, we needed to become a formal organization. And so we formed a 501c3 nonprofit. You can see a picture here of us attending city council meeting. We also reached out to the corporate world and met with a law firm that offered their services pro bono to get us set up as a 501c3. We worked with a very prestigious land planning and landscape architecture firm to start doing some concept design for the great park. And of course, we continued our public outreach to get folks to let the city council know that they really wanted. I must have something turned on here. I'm kind of scribbling, apologize for that. Don't know what I turned on to create those little lines. Anyway, what happened at the end of that public outreach survey is that 82% of the respondents who participated wanted gardens. And that was more than any other feature on the survey, despite it not being listed. So we were pretty excited about the results that we were able to achieve with our little public outreach efforts. And the city, to its credit, after that, decided to hire a consulting firm, AECOM, that would do a little analysis of the site and tell the city council a little bit more about what a botanic garden would entail. And so they used the 59, 60-ish acres, and through their research indicated that it would have attendance between 169 and 312,000, that the way that most of these botanic gardens operate is a partnership with a nonprofit and a city or county, that it would cost about $50 million to build. It would probably generate, according to them, looking at other gardens, 1.8 million in revenues and expenses of 3.6 million. So that's where the nonprofit would come in play, is to raise the funds, because most botanic gardens do operate at a deficit and either need help from the city or county to support them, just like they would support sports fields. And the nonprofit then also helps generate that shortfall. We also continued to do outreach through a public event that the city of Irvine puts on every year until COVID. But in 2018 and 2019, we attended their Global Village Festival. And in 3 days, this was such a popular idea. We stood there with clipboards asking people if they wanted to be included on our email list. And you know how often we don't want to be included on people's email lists. And lo and behold, we were able in 3 days to get 1,400 people to give us their precious emails because they really wanted to hear how this project was going. Of course, as a new organization, we were taking baby steps to move ourselves along, doing outreach to public organizations like yours, garden clubs, also all of the politicians involved in Irvine, and some very helpful firms in the corporate world who were urban planners, legal firms. And then finally, a picture of this great crew who are professional videographers who make commercials, so get paid the big bucks to do this. And if you go to our website and look at our little video, you'll see the end result of what they did for us, because we wanted to have something that would give folks who aren't familiar perhaps with what the vision is, what a botanical garden can do. And we can't thank them enough for doing this for us, again, pro bono, for free. And our land planning firm, PlaceWorks, was so generous and came up with just a conceptual idea, just what they call a bubble drawing, that shows perhaps some of the components that we might have, such as a children's education and garden, cultural gardens, so that we can all embrace and learn about different cultures that make up our communities, meadows, desert gardens, woodlands, a lake, etc. These are just some of the great ideas that we could include in a botanic garden. And this is a site plan of the cultural terrace, which shows the garden being located right smack in the center and surrounded by museums and an amphitheater and a water park. Wouldn't that be great if this is how it actually came to be? More about that later. Here's what we found on our journey. We found that public gardens are not just passive places, but they are thriving, and thriving with people and thriving with events. And I'm sure you've all been to Sherman Library and Gardens in Corona del Mar. And, you know, even though that's a small public garden, it is just absolutely crammed with beautiful things to see. And they have lovely events and a lovely restaurant there. And then to get a broader perspective, Kay and I went in both 2018 and 2019 to the American Public Garden Association's international conference. And oh my gosh, what an experience this was. We needed all the help we could get. And here we were with over 1,000 people who are the people who create the programs, manage, operate, etc. all the public gardens in the United States, Canada, Mexico. It was an amazing environment. And we'll show you some of the things we experienced there. Here's Kay and I strolling through a couple of the public gardens. We were part of over 1,100 people who attended this conference. They represented hundreds of gardens, as I said, throughout North America. They offered 30 garden tours, and this is in the Washington, D.C. area. And so we got to visit 12. That was all we had time for, 12 out of the 30 gardens. We'll show you a few pictures from those. They offered this conference is basically to share ideas and ways of operating programs, sources of fund, etc. And they offered over 100 sessions. Between the two of us, we were able to attend 22 of them. And they also have an exhibition and had over 50 exhibitors who were exhibiting everything from plant material to signage to exhibitions that you can have come to your botanic gardens. And of course, because this is a nonprofit, we do not have any paid staff. We are all volunteers. And the funds that we have raised so far, we use just to cover our fixed expenses of website, social media, etc. And so Kay and I paid our own way, but it was worth every penny. And it was our big vacation for the year, had a blast. Some of the tours they set up for us were once in a lifetime tours. We got to go to the Smithsonian National Treasures plant vault, and we got to meet Oscar the orchid. Now, you know, you're plant people, so you're probably as excited as we were to do this. Oscar and many of these other plants that are in this National Treasures plant vault are identified as, they have a list of, if there was a public emergency, who would they save? And Oscar is one of the ones that would be evacuated first. So super fun to go to these places. Here's another absolute treasure. This is at the National Arboretum. This is Miyajima bonsai, and it dates from the 1600s. It survived Hiroshima, and it was given to the National Arboretum by Japan to commemorate and encourage peace. So as we stood around it and listened to the gentleman who takes care of it tell us how he was literally shaking the first time he took pruners to this amazing plant, we were just in awe of the plant and of his skill. Someone before we started the presentation mentioned that they had seen the corpse flower, the giant corpse flower, which is, Kay can say this better than me, Amorphophallus titanum, I believe is how you say it. And these corpse flowers have been adopted at a number of botanic gardens because they bloom very rarely. There's often cameras attached to their little areas so that folks can see when they bloom. And they're quite the tourist attraction. And the US Botanic Garden has quite the collection of these guys. We also were able to attend at the US Botanic Garden reception. And again, under glass, there was a whole greenhouse devoted to Southern California flora. It's beautiful, unique, and we probably take it for granted, but it is very prized worldwide. So what have we learned on this journey that we've been taking for the last 4 years? Well, we became acquainted with a new generation of garden leaders, which Kay and I were so excited to see that there are many young people who are now getting into this field. And what we also learned at this conference is that botanic gardens are not, and I can say this because I am a grandma, but they're not your grandma's garden. If you had an idea that botanic gardens are just passive places with lovely plants with their scientific names labeled and not much else happens there, that is not true. The younger gardeners and the philosophy these days is to transform gardens into inspirational and educational and aspirational places that are full of activity and energy. They also shared a lot of very up and coming ideas, which is actually an acronym for inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. Traditionally, botanic gardens were perhaps not used by a lot of the population. And so the big movement now in botanic gardens is to reach out to folks and let them know that gardens are for everyone, young, old, all different cultures, all different races. And by bringing everyone into the garden, it makes the garden stronger and more relevant and resilient. And as we've seen, recently in some incidences in our country, we could certainly use a garden as a place to hopefully make some of the unrest we've seen lessen and get to know one another better. So what has been seen in these botanic gardens across the country? Well, believe it or not, rising attendance. And this was before COVID. Since COVID, gardens attendance has gone through the roof because, as we all know, hasn't been a whole lot of stuff that you can do during COVID. And of course, the botanic gardens are wide open spaces, and with appropriate safeguards, they are very safe and have become very popular places for people to go. But the public expects, again, not just a passive place to wander through, although that's amazing for stress relief that we all need these days. But public expects to have educational opportunities and events and things that really give them engagement, opportunities to engage. We also learned, though, that funding these botanic gardens is changing, not just reliant upon public funding anymore. And so the botanic gardens are becoming great at becoming venues where there's a lot of potential things that you can do, events that you can attend, and they can use those events to also supplement their funding sources. And the result is that they've become much more impactful in the community. Many of them are, hosting the holiday lights events, and those have become treasured community events where, that's the ticket you want to have during the holidays is to get in there and see those holiday lights, as well as the place for your kids or grandkids to go for summer camps. We learned who's walking through the door at these places. And it's not just, as I said, those of us from garden clubs who adore gardens regardless. So there are a lot more folks who are just, especially during COVID, exploring and out for the day. And once, of course, they get to see the benefits that botanic gardens have, hopefully they become members and long-term supporters. Of course, there's a lot of facilitators, what we call facilitators in terms of parents and teachers who are bringing children out and perhaps other relatives out who need a break, who need to have an opportunity to join in some, these days, self-directed education, but just so valuable to have that opportunity. Then, of course, there are the experience seekers, those who come out for, the tulip bloom, or the camellia bloom at Descanso, or to come for a specific education and perhaps seasonal event. But that brings us back to Irvine. So going to take you on a little journey of what's going on out there and let you know that we're in a really hopeful place right now. But we'll give you a little taste of the journey that we've had over the last 4 years. Of course, a lot of when it's a city property, there are politics that go on. But we continue to persevere because we know that this Botanic Garden is so desperately needed. We do not have that many gardens and nothing of significant size in Orange County. Even though we're the world's 4th largest economy in California, and even though our county population is 4 million and growing. This is a map of the Great Park, and what you can see down at the bottom here is the cultural terrace area that I was talking about, where the Botanic Garden was originally slated to be in the 2007 master plan. You can see that it's kind of hazy and fuzzy, and that is to indicate that the city hasn't decided what's going to go there yet, except that they have located Wild Rivers Water Park up in a corner. The part that's finished is over here. This is the sports complex, including the Ducks hockey team ice facility. And then what was supposed to be here was a golf course, but the city has now decided not to do a golf course. And in a moment, you'll see that that's one of the more recently proposed locations for the Botanic Garden. Here's a little bit different version of a map of the Great Park. Again, you can see here's the cultural terrace to orient you again. And now instead of a golf course here, this is one of the sites for the proposed Veterans Cemetery that you may have heard about. And then this is the other site for the proposed Veterans Cemetery. And currently these are competing. There are different factions who support each of those sites. And what is happening right now is the state of California, who has the money to build the Veterans Cemetery, is doing a study of the financial and other feasibility issues for the 2 sites. And their decision and report is supposed to be out in May. And what that means to us is that the city will then be able to go ahead and decide on where other features of the park will go, such as the Botanic Garden. As early as last December, so about a little over a year ago, the proposed site at that time for the Botanic Garden was 40 acres, so reduced from the 59 acres, but 40 acres along the proposed Veterans Cemetery. But then there were some political conflicts that resulted in both of these sites being up for consideration. And so since then, we have been waiting for that to be resolved. Here's a third map that's maybe a little bit easier to read than the one previously. Again, here you can see the completed area, the sports complex. This is the cultural terrace, which now will include Wild Rivers Water Park. And then the cultural terrace that will be more quickly developed is over in this corner, because this section here has some remediation issues that need to be completed from when it was a marine base. Again, this is one of the proposed sites for the cemetery and the possible proposed site for the Botanic Garden. This site up here that isn't outlined is the other cemetery site. And then because there is a need in the county for a fire training facility, there's now part of the park that's going to be devoted to that, and a fire museum. But our mission is to make sure that that Botanic Garden gets included in the park, whether it's in the cultural terrace or adjacent to one of the cemeteries. We are waiting to hear, but we are absolutely determined to continue our efforts, and we hope you'll join us in emphasizing to the City Council that we really, really need this Botanic Garden. And why? Well, it's evident through pictures like this where there are Botanic Gardens. People love them, and people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. Doesn't matter whether they play sports or are into many other activities. Everyone loves a garden, and in fact, the attendance figures will support that. Attendance nationwide is on track to exceed the attendance at NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, soccer, and hockey combined. So it's pretty important. We'd also like to update you on something that happened last year in the middle of the pandemic, because this is so hopeful to me, and we were so amazed at the resilience of these young people and what they did literally in the middle of a pandemic. This is a picture of Kay and I, obviously pre-pandemic, because look at that crowd of people. When we went out to Cal Poly Pomona, because their instructor, professor, had heard about this opportunity for a botanic garden and thought that this was an amazing opportunity for his architecture design class to come up with plans for the, at that time, 40-acre botanic garden. And so Kay and I went out there, and gosh, what an amazing day in this room full of, gosh, I forget how many, but 70 students or more and their instructors. Gave them a presentation and got them excited to embark upon the design process for each of their culmination, a semester-long design project. And then the pandemic hit. And gardening, amazingly enough, with the public became a huge hit. Home gardening was, here's the headline: blooms around the world. People are rushing to plant pandemic gardens. As you've probably noticed from our local nurseries, they cannot keep plants in stock. I know I had to go to multiple places to find kale. And the pandemic basically turned us all into gardeners. But what Kay and I were afraid of is that all of the universities shut down public attendance, and in these landscape architecture classes, it's a very collaborative process. So we just feared that the Cal Poly Pomona project would just come to a complete halt. But what did they do? They pivoted to Zoom, just like we have as garden clubs and in our own jobs. And they continued on and were able to work on their projects throughout the pandemic. And then lo and behold, in May, they gave us these amazing presentations of a couple of dozen different plans, because they were broken up into teams. And they each team came up with a completely different plan for the garden, different themes, different focuses. But the quality of the work, Kay has been in the landscape design business as a career, and she will attest that these students were able to create some amazingly professional designs. So we have some absolutely awesome designs that we can use as starting points to finalize a design for the garden. And we really look forward to doing that in the future. Where we are today is we are meeting with City Council and the Mayor after the election in last November. We have what we feel is a very pro-garden majority on the City Council. And so we are currently working with them and have been assured that as soon as they get this report from the state that will identify where the Veterans Cemetery will be, they will then be at a point where they can finalize a location for the Botanic Garden. However, we still need to let them know how much this Botanic Garden is desired. And so we would really appreciate it if you would join us in that effort, because at my age, since I started this project, I've had my first grandchild almost 2 years ago, and I'm expecting 2 more grandkids, little boys, this summer. And it's really what I want my legacy to be, is to make sure that we have this world-class botanic garden in Orange County that we can enjoy with our kids and grandkids now and leave to future generations. We all want to pay it forward. There's nothing more inspiring for most of us than watching kids play in a garden. And what you can do is, if you so desire, is go to our website, which is right there on the screen, and you can join as a member, and you'll receive a little monthly newsletter which contains articles that our writers group writes that are wonderful seasonal garden oriented pieces. We also have Facebook and Instagram pages, and we'd love for you to follow along there. And when you do that, we'll keep you up to date on what's going on. And in the future, when the decisions are about to be made for the location of the garden, we would most appreciate, and we would send you a notice of this if you decide to share your email address with us, so that you perhaps can drop a short email to the Irvine City Council in support of the Botanic Garden. And so I thank you very much for your attention. And with that, we have about 15 minutes left to go and ask some questions. I'll click my video back on, and I'll stop screen sharing. And I have a few questions in the chat. If anybody else has questions, please enter them in the chat, and we'll address those. Or if you just have any comments and want to turn your microphone on, I'm not sure how you guys usually handle that in your meetings, but we'd love to hear your comments, suggestions. This is a community effort, so we are wide open to any thoughts that you guys have. One of the comments says, Chelsea Garden Show, pant, pant. Oh, yeah, I'll tell you, it's amazing. If there's any way you can finagle that sometime, it's great.
So Tina, I do see a question. It says, will you and I be involved in the design of the Botanic Garden? And that's from Weege.
Yes, Weege. We will, obviously there will have to be a professional design company hired, that will be, we hope quite, what's the right word? Quite prestigious. But yes, we hope that as the nonprofit who will be partnering with the city, that we'll be involved in the design. We also hope, as is our understanding in general with these projects, because Kay and I actually went up and met with the landscape architecture firm in LA that did the original design of the 59-acre. It was just a concept design. It wasn't a detailed design. But in 2007, they put together an amazing package. And so we went up and met with them, and they were kind enough to let us know what the process is. And one step in the process is to have focus groups, which will actually make suggestions and help the ideas for the Botanic Garden gel. And then so we hope not just us, but others in the community will participate.
And then Weege also asks, realistically, what kind of timeline are we looking at for this Botanic Garden to become a reality?
Great question, and one that we ask quite frequently. Frankly, if it ends up being adjacent, if the site ends up being adjacent to the Veterans Cemetery, I think the timeline will be pretty, not fast in terms of we can go there next year, but the Veterans Cemetery will have funding, and so I believe that grading, etc., would start within a couple of years, which means the Botanic Garden would go jointly in that time frame. If it ends up being located out in the Cultural Terrace, we've not been told what the timeline for that area is, but Wild Rivers has their plans in place and has been allocated a site by the city. So were the Botanic Garden to be near Wild Rivers, I think that access could happen relatively soon also.
It's one of those, it depends if there's a runway to be removed or not. And so what's called the golf course site has already had the runway removed. So it would move much quicker than having, to wait for that to be taken out.
But one of the things that we hope to do with the city is in the parts of the park that are already developed, if you've been out there, they're not the most, it's utilitarian landscaping. Let's put it that way. It's not particularly
You're being
gorgeous, from a blooming and, interesting kind of standpoint. And so one of the ideas that we've had is to work with the city on that sort of area. They have a visitor center, for instance. And wouldn't it be great if we could have some preview gardens, right? Some small gardens that might have certain themes, or if we could have events where in spaces that aren't being actively uh, used, if we could have a mass public, let's get, a couple hundred people out there to sow poppy seeds, California poppy seeds, in October, November, and watch those bloom along the parkways, et cetera. So we have lots of really cool ideas that we hope we can activate with the city once the pandemic is over. So just stay tuned. We hope that there will be some programming and activities going on out there before the actual garden site is fully developed.
Well, and the next generation does too, and that's what's important because we're all getting to be of a certain age. But the land is where we are right now, because once that land is given over to another use, we will never see it again. If you've been in Orange County for even a couple of years, this is just a once in a lifetime opportunity for a garden for all of us. So, even though it seems to be kind of grinding through the political process, those of us who grow a tree know that, first of all, you have to have a hole to put it in. And so when it comes time for us to ask for help, we hope you're all on our email list, because sometimes it's as simple as sending an email to City Council saying, this is something valuable that we want to see in Orange County, rather than having to drive up to LA or down to San Diego. So that's why we're here with you today, and we hope you can support us in that. Thank you.
And one of my favorite things that I forgot to say that Kay came up with, and really puts this in perspective, is a 59-acre botanic garden. If we could retain that kind of site, is only equivalent to 5 holes of golf. So when you think about it that way, doesn't Orange County deserve the equivalent of 5 holes of golf planted in a botanic garden? I'm even a golfer, and I'm like, heck yeah, we have enough golf courses. Let's give land, or allocate land that's equivalent to 5 holes of golf, so that we can have this legacy of an amazing botanic garden.
Because one of the things they want to do is keep making us smaller. They see us as landscape. But as you know, it needs to kind of be an experience where you can go and actually get into the garden. And if it's so small that you can just walk through it before you finished your, morning cup of coffee, that's not the same thing as being out in nature for a good part of the day. So, to also talk about the golf course, only like 17% or less of the population plays golf, but the entire population could have access to a public garden. And that ends up being a social equity issue, which I think is really important. When you go out to the Great Park now, you'll see young mothers going around the soccer fields with their kids in the strollers, and they're just going around in these mind-numbing circles, or they're trying to picnic on the soccer pitch. And there's just, what, we can do better than that in Orange County. I really think we do, and we can. And it could be a world-class site between San Diego and LA, and let's just do it. Come on, politicians, let's do it.
Well, I do appreciate your your kind comments. We have several people who have thanked us for our perseverance in these efforts, and we do appreciate that, because it's what keeps us going, is to know that there are lots of people behind us who want this just as much as we do. And one more time, a suggestion for us to mention our website again, and it's gpgardencoalition.org. G as in great, P as in park, gardencoalition.org. And if you go to our website, there's a place where you can sign up either to become a member with a small dues. But if you aren't up for doing that, there is also a way just to enter your email address and join our email list. And then we'll be able to stay in touch that way.
Wonderful.
Anything else? Oh, and if you're on Facebook or Instagram, just put in the search bar, just put Great Park Garden Coalition, and you'll also find our page, and you can follow our page, and then you'll also see our posts on Facebook, which we try to do once a week or a couple times a month.
This may be way down the line, but do you have any plans for all the local garden clubs to be involved? Because our civic beautification group works in the Park Semper Fi and Casa Romantica, doing weeding and things. Are there any plans like that?
Absolutely. Because Kay and I are master gardeners, University of California master gardeners, and that's what we do, is volunteer at assorted public venues. I envision a very, very robust volunteer, staff or volunteer crew, and lots of volunteer opportunities. Whether it's maintenance or helping with education, or helping with any of the facilities out there, such as if we're able to have a cafe or a bookstore, that sort of thing, a gift shop. We would be establishing, in my mind, crews of hundreds of volunteers, and just make it be their happy place where they can come see friends and enjoy the space and giving back to the community.
Great. Sounds good.
I've been watching this great park, wondering if it's ever going to evolve. I remember back in '07 getting all that fancy booklet when the whole big plan. And I'm so glad you guys have taken this on. I want to congratulate you for all of us, I'm sure, but this is just fabulous. And I hope there will be. I hope that you can, maybe the city council that's kind of in charge really of the whole thing, maybe they should take some trips around the state and see some of the things. We just saw a presentation by that, what is it, Lotus Land, was it, up in Santa Barbara? And then, we've got Quail Gardens, and we've got all these things. And maybe it's good for those people, if they've never visited some of these gardens, that they should have an idea of what could happen.
Well, great minds think alike. We actually pinned them down in our last meeting to go on a trip with us up to Huntington Library and Gardens. And so we're gonna get them out from behind the orange curtain up to Huntington Gardens. And I've been in touch with Huntington Gardens and to the president's office, and God bless them, in the same day I sent the email, they wrote back and said, absolutely, we will be happy to have those officials and staff come take a look. So that's the amazing thing about the garden world, as you guys know. We're all kindred souls, and we all know what value this gives, and we all want to help each other. So we're excited to move forward.
Unbelievably generous group. So, it's like all we have to do is say we need, and they've been there for us throughout. So we just need to get the land so we can get things moving.
And that's why, if you can, if you are willing to give us your email address, we do not send out junk email. We do not share email lists with any other group. The only thing we would use it for is to send you a monthly, little piece of interesting garden articles that we write, and then to send you an e-blast if there's a critical vote that's going to be happening at the city council, so that you could perhaps lend your emails in support of what we're trying to get done.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions? Thank you so much, Tina and Kay. This was very enlightening and interesting. And boy, I hope we get to see that soon.
We do too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great audience.
Us
Thank
too.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I stick around, everybody. I think